Now available as paperback and e-reader from the author of Spinsterella, A Strange and Unusual Romance, and Spellbound, A Darker Shade of Black comes from legendary magazine. And you get the conclusion of the Spinsterella trilogy in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers today. One of my ebooks, The Misadventures of Captain-Save-A-Hoe, a part of the Simp series, was taken down from the US page of Amazon.com a couple of days ago. And I've been contacting Amazon.com about this, and the response they gave me on Friday is that they had to take it to somebody else. So they tell me that in a couple of days they will tell me why the book was taken down and what they're going to do about it. Now, The Misadventures of Captain-Save-A-Hoe still remains on sale in Amazon's UK page, Amazon's French page, Amazon's Vietnamese page, and Amazon's other foreign pages. So if you live in a foreign country, you can still pick up The Misadventures of Captain-Save-A-Hoe there, but you can't pick it up in the US. In order to buy The Misadventures of Captain-Save-A-Hoe in the US, you're going to have to go to Smashwords, the iBook store, or one of the other online retailers out there if you want to pick up a copy of this ebook. Now, some people on Facebook have been speculating that Amazon took The Misadventures of Captain-Save-A-Hoe off their page in the US due to this lawsuit between rapper E40 and this street-lit author named iCane, who is also known as Erica Kane. Now, this lawsuit was filed by E40 on Halloween to say that this author, Erica Kane or iCane, infringed on the copyright for his song Captain-Save-A-Hoe. And he says that because of the title of the book that she produced. However, as I take a more critical look at this release of this Captain-Save-A-Hoe book, I see nothing more than a marketing stunt set up by a street-lit author in the hopes of getting attention. And this attempt to get attention clearly shows me how clueless both E40 and this author are regarding the publishing business, because they're trying to sell this book in this way that a rapper would sell music, by trying to stir up some controversy over this 23-year-old song. And they think by filing this lawsuit, it'll generate some sort of controversy and some sort of heat, and that will lead to sales. Unfortunately, that's just not how the publishing world works. And many street-lit authors have learned this the hard way a couple of years ago, back when street-lit was at the height of its popularity, because I remember back then when street-lit authors were trying to bring these music business marketing strategies into the publishing business, and they were all falling flat on their face. Like guys like Carl Weber were having royalty disputes with authors of his imprint, and they were having beefs. People were trying to start disses in books and start arguments in books. And in the literary world and the publishing world, this stuff just doesn't fly. If it's not on the page, people aren't concerned about it. So any attempt to try to stir up any sort of controversy in this sort of way, it doesn't really lead to big book sales. It may get a lot of chatter online, and in the case of this Captain-Save-A-Hoe thing, it doesn't look like there's much chatter because, one, the song is over 23 years old, and two, the median audience is over 40 years old, so it's not looking like it's stirring up the controversy that E40 or iCane were looking for, because when it comes down to books, again, books just aren't sold this way. They're not sold through people starting all sorts of controversy on social media. When it comes down to books, books are primarily sold by word of mouth. If you're not writing anything that's great on the page and people aren't telling other people about what's on your page, then you're not going to sell books. And when I look at this whole case, I clearly see two people again who know nothing about the publishing business and know nothing about copyright law. As a guy who is a publisher, I fully understand copyright law, and if E40 is suing to say that his copyright was infringed, he has absolutely no case, because when it comes down to copyright law works like this. You can copyright the lyrics to a song, you can copyright the content of a book, but you cannot copyright a title. This is something I ran into with another author who decided to get after me after I published the ebook, The Myth of the Strong Black Woman. She came directly to my Facebook page and said that I was infringing on her copyright because my book had the same title, The Myth of the Strong Black Woman. And I had to sit down and show her the page on the U.S. copyright website, which showed her you cannot copyright a title. Anything can have the same title, but if the content is different, that is that person's copyright. And you're just going to have to deal with the fact that there are other products with the exact same title as yours. I mean, I have to deal with this all the time with books like ISIS because there are so many books about the Egyptian gods like this. You can copyright the lyrics to a song, you can copyright the content of a book, but you cannot copyright a title. This is something I ran into with another author who decided to get after me after I published the ebook, The Myth of the Strong Black Woman. She came directly to my Facebook page and said that I was infringing on her copyright because my book had the same title, The Myth of the Strong Black Woman. And I had to sit down and show her the page on the U.S. copyright website, which showed her you cannot copyright a title. Anything can have the same title, but if the content is different, that is that person's copyright. And you're just going to have to deal with the fact that there are other products with the exact same title as yours. I mean, I have to deal with this all the time with books like ISIS because there are so many books about the Egyptian goddess out there. It's just not funny. It's just part of the business, and you just learn how to deal with it. And the way you deal with it is by making sure your content on your page is appealing to readers. If your content is solid, you're not going to have anything to worry about. But your E40 thinks that this is infringing on his copyright, but he shows how little he knows about copyright. Now, the other argument that could be had for your E40 is regarding trademark. And trademark is something people can do to a popular phrase. Unfortunately, E40's argument would fall apart in court on this because people have been using the phrase Captain-Save-A-Hoe on social media for a good 8, 9, 10 years now. I mean, I remember Dan Freeman using it back in the day. I remember guys like The Advice Show, Harvey Superboy, Tariq Nasheed, Akwesi 100. Numerous men have used this in the title of their videos that have been monetized, and we have not heard a word from your E40 regarding this. Moreover, people have made merchandise with the name Captain-Save-A-Hoe on t-shirts for almost a decade now, and your E40 never said a single word about any of these t-shirts, buttons, baseball caps, and other assorted merchandise produced by people all over the world on places like Zazzle, Spreadshirt, and many other companies, and he has not said a single word. And in order for a trademark to be considered valid, a person has to use that trademark within 10 years. Now, E40's song came out in 1994, and E40 has not used his trademark since 1994, if he had a trademark, because we look at all these people who have made merchandise with the name Captain-Save-A-Hoe on it, and it clearly shows he was not in use of his trademark, nor was he filing lawsuits to deal with the infringements on his trademark. So that argument falls completely apart, just like the copyright argument falls completely apart. And the reason why I say the arguments fall completely apart in both cases is because this looks like a marketing stunt. Because when I look at the way this book was presented on Amazon.com, I saw a Kindle version, I saw an audio version, and I saw a CD version. Now this shows me somebody who was more interested in the music business than they are the book business, because if this was a serious book, there would be a Kindle version and there would also be a paperback version, because people who were trying to sell books are trying to sell books to readers. This again looks like a music business stunt and something sold to people in the music industry. And the lawsuit was heavily carried not by mainstream media, but by hip hop outlets like XXL and TMZ and other hip hop sites, but it wasn't really covered by mainstream media. And when it comes down to the mainstream media, the highest one was TMZ. And even there, the response was indifference because people who understand copyright and trademark law will tell you again there is no case here because you cannot copyright a title and the trademark was not actively used by E40 over 2 decades, and the span that he had to use it was within the first decade, and that wasn't done because we see all these merchandise out here by other people, well, Zazzle, Spreadshirt, and all these other companies, and no active filing of a lawsuit. And we don't see him filing complaints with YouTube over the numerous people like Tariq Nasheed, who was very popular, who made an entire hour-long video discussing Captain-Save-A-Hoes. He did not file any sort of flagging or any sort of copyright lawsuit in that case. And his whole argument falls completely apart when it comes down to copyright infringement. In order for there to be copyright infringement, someone would have to actively use parts of the lyrics of the song and or use lyrics of the song in a way that profited them. So his lawsuit about ending this book and getting book copies removed off the shelf, that's not going to happen because these are digital copies. And when it comes down to self-published books that are digital, I can tell you from personal experience, you don't get that many sales, especially on the initial launch of an ebook. On the initial launch of an ebook, your sales are going to be slow. Again, when it comes down to books, you have to build a word of mouth. And that can take anywhere from a year to 2 years overall. I know this from personal experience because I remember back in 2014, I released Isis Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, and that book got no traction for a year and a half. And I also released Why 70% of Black Women Are Single in 2014, and that book didn't get any traction until about late 2015, and that was after I gave away over 600 free copies. And with Cyber Goddess, I had to give away a couple of hundred free copies to get some traction on it. And the same thing in 2013 with Misadventures of Captain-Save-A-Hoe. The book did not sell anything. In the most part, the almost close to 2,500 or 2,700 copies were given away free. So there's no money in publishing. If he's thinking that there's going to be some sort of big royalty output like the music business, I'm sorry, it just doesn't happen that way. Usually you wind up giving away more books than are actually sold because you're trying to build the readership, you're trying to build the audience, and usually in most cases you have to do this through a serial process. That's what I did with the Stop Simpin', the Manginas, the Misadventures of Captain-Save-A-Hoe, and eventually Stop Simpin' in the Workplace, because what happens is people read one title, then they go back and buy the other titles. They don't go out here and buy that one title because that's not going to make them any money. You put a book out there straight by itself, it's not going to make any money. Nobody's going to buy a print-on-demand book or an ebook from a self-published author the way these music business people and these street-lit people think it's going to happen. Usually, when it comes down to these books, it takes time to build an audience. It takes time to build momentum because you're an unknown author. This Kane, this is her first book, and it clearly shows me it's her first book because I look at the cover of her book, and the illustration is completely amateurish. It's extremely gaudy, and it alienates the core audience. When I look at this Kane's cover, it's just too visually busy. And the one image on the book, this Captain-Save-A-Hoe she has on the book, is holding a white woman. Now, if this book was meant to cater to black females, which is the core audience for most black literature, she's already alienated 90% of them, because once they saw that black man with that white woman, that was a nail in the coffin for that book. As a publisher, again, I have personal experience in this, and when it comes down to some black women, and a large majority of them, once they see a black man with a white woman on an image, that's a nail in the coffin. It's finished. You're not going to get anybody to go there. And then once you've got the hoe on there, you've lost another good 5 or 10% of black women, and that's the end of that. I know that from personal experience. Now, the real kicker would be if she were to put a light-skinned woman on there, that really would have alienated black women, because these are the things that alienate black women as it relates to products. Once they see a black man on an image with a white woman, you have pretty much killed any chance of that product being appealing to them. And once you've done that, it's over. So I looked at that Captain-Save-A-Hoe cover right there and I said, this is done. This is finished. And then I looked at the format she had, which was audiobook, Kindle, and CD. And again, I looked at it and I said to myself, this is someone from the music business. This is someone looking to pull a music business style stunt in the hopes of getting attention. And this is someone who has no real understanding of the trade publishing business. Those of us who understand the trade publishing business see this for the stunt that it is, because we know copyright law, we know trademark law, and we know that there is absolutely no real case for this, because you cannot copyright a title and you can't really trademark a title unless you can have used it actively within the last 7 to 10 years. You have to actively use trademarks in order to file a trademark suit. And your E40 doesn't look like he has a trademark suit because he's talking about copyright. And when it comes down to copyright, songs are copyrighted based on the lyrics, not the title. And titles are not copyrightable. This is just basic copyright law. And anybody who knows the business of publishing would sit down and tell him this so he wouldn't waste his money on a lawsuit. Things can have the same title and be two completely different things. For example, you have Jamie Hernandez, who published the comic book Love and Rockets, and you have the 80s band Love and Rockets, and both have been working together harmoniously for over 25, 30 years, because Jamie Hernandez and the band Love and Rockets both understand that if they went out here and sued each other, they would be wasting money. Moreover, they'd be wasting time because they want to make money. They understand that, people identify both, and both are relatable to each other, and both were really inspired by each other. I heard on one time on Casey's Top 40, they said that the band was inspired by the comic, so they both make money off of each other. They don't sit there and try to file lawsuits against each other because they know, again, it's a waste of their time and a waste of their money, and that they're both going to benefit from people hearing about the title. And another example of this is something I did a couple of years ago with the novel Spellbound. The novel Spellbound was inspired by the Susie and the Banshee song, and you don't see any of these